Have you ever wondered why, despite your best efforts, your financial life seems to be stuck? It seems that the harder you try, the harder it gets, as if something invisible is holding you back. What if I told you that this isn't a punishment, but a sign? A sign that you've been chosen for something greater. You may think that your financial struggles are the result of chance, but there's actually a purpose behind them. There is a reason why you are facing these difficulties, and more importantly, there is a key to unlock them. Stay with me to the end, because today you will understand why your journey has been so challenging and how you can change this reality once and for all. Have you ever felt like you are giving your all, but life insists on challenging you? As if every effort you make is followed by a new obstacle, a new financial difficulty that seems to have no end. Maybe you look around and see people who don't follow God's ways prospering, while you, who are trying to do the right thing, are struggling. That seems unfair, doesn't it? But what if I told you there was a greater reason? When I was among you, many believed that material wealth was a sign of blessing and that poverty was a curse. But what I taught was quite the opposite. The greatest wealth is not in what you can touch, but in what you can feel and understand. Someone's financial life may be stuck not because God has forgotten them, but because He is shaping them for something much greater than money can buy. Think of the great men and women who have walked in the truth. Many of them faced difficulties, not because they were less loved, but because they were being prepared. Every difficult experience is like the fire that refines gold. Nothing of value comes without a process of refinement. And you, who feel that your financial life is stuck, may be in the midst of this process. Perhaps you've asked yourself, why? Me, what did I do wrong? But wouldn't the right question be, what is God trying to teach me? Because whenever there is a difficulty, there is a lesson. Wherever there is an obstacle, there is an opportunity to grow. The problem is that you often look at the challenges and feel afraid instead of seeing what is being built within you. If you feel like you don't have enough today, ask yourself, have you been relying on what you can see or what you can't yet see? Because true abundance doesn't start in your pocket, it starts in your mind and heart. How many people do you know who have a lot but live an empty life? How many live in luxury but have no peace? That's because true abundance comes not just from human effort, but from a deep connection with the source of life. When I said that, the kingdom of heaven is within you, I meant to show that the greatest wealth is not in the hands but in the soul. Those who are chosen for something greater often go through challenges that teach them to trust more in the unseen than in the ephemeral. For if your faith is shaken by a lack of money, then money will always have power over you. And that's exactly why many of you are facing this financial struggle. Because you are being called to a level of trust and understanding that few reach. You are not being punished, you are being prepared. When you trust, even when it seems difficult, you demonstrate that your faith does not depend on circumstances, but on something much greater. But how do you know if this is a learning experience or a wake-up call to change something in your life? How do you know if God is shaping you, or if something needs to be adjusted? These are questions that need to be answered, because only when we understand the purpose of a challenge can we overcome it. And that's what I'm going to talk about now. Many people believe that money is the villain in their lives. They think that if only they had more resources, everything would be fine. But money in itself is neither good nor bad. It just amplifies what you already have. If you're insecure, money will never be enough. If there is pride, it will be used to make you feel superior. If there is fear, it will become an obsession. So before you want more, ask yourself, what would I do with it? What kind of person would I become? When I was among you, I saw many who had accumulated wealth and were still unhappy. I remember a rich young man who came to me seeking the way to eternal life. He followed all the laws, did what was right, but his heart was still attached to what he had. When I told him to leave everything and follow me, he became sad and left. Not because money was a problem, but because he couldn't see any purpose beyond it. Money only shows who you really are. If you are generous, it will be a tool to help. If you are selfish, it will be a wall separating you from others. If you seek security in it, you'll never find peace because you'll always be afraid of losing it. This is why many people face financial difficulties, not because God wants them to suffer, but because He wants them to discover something deeper about themselves. Have you ever noticed how some people live in peace, even with little? They understand that true security doesn't come from bank balances, but from trusting in the source that provides all things. The problem is not money itself, but the place it occupies in the heart. When it becomes an idol, an obsession, it begins to control your thoughts and decisions. Many of you ask for prosperity, but are you ready to receive it? If you made a lot of money today, would you know what to do with it? For with money comes responsibility. It can be a blessing or a trap, depending on how it is used. Some ask for abundance, but deep down they haven't learned to trust. Others live in fear of lack, not realizing that this fear prevents them from seeing new opportunities. The great truth is that you weren't put on this earth to be slaves to money. You came here to learn, to grow, and to evolve spiritually. If you are experiencing difficulties today, perhaps it is because you have yet to understand that money does not define your worth. Many think that a lack of resources means failure, but what really matters is who you become in the process. If you feel stuck in your financial life, ask yourself, what do I need to learn from this? Perhaps God is teaching you to trust. Maybe He's showing you that you already have everything you need to take the next step. Or maybe He's waiting for you to stop worrying and start living with gratitude for what you already have. Abundance doesn't begin when you have a lot, but when you understand that you already have enough within you. When you learn to use the little wisely, the much comes naturally. But for that to happen, you must first understand that challenges are part of the journey, and the greater the mission, the greater the trials. Many people wonder why life seems to be more difficult for those who are trying to follow a path of faith and righteousness. Have you ever felt this way? As if you are constantly being tested while those who ignore spiritual principles prosper? This doesn't happen by accident. When someone has a greater calling, the challenges will always be proportional to the greatness of that calling. Look at those who have left legacies on earth. None of them had an easy road. Moses faced the desert before he freed a people. Joseph was sold into slavery before he became governor of Egypt. David was persecuted before he became king. And even when I walked among you, I faced rejection, trials, and betrayal before I fulfilled my mission. This is because all who are chosen must be forged in the fire of hardship before they receive what is prepared for them. You may not understand right now, but every situation that appears to be an obstacle is actually building something within you. Scarcity teaches you to trust. Rejection teaches you to find your identity in something greater. Struggle teaches perseverance. Every challenge comes to strengthen a part of you that will be essential in fulfilling your purpose. And do you know why? Because when the mission is big, you can't be fragile. You can't bend at the first obstacle. Life can't carry you along like a leaf blown by the wind. You have to be firm, strong, unshakable. And you get that strength not when things are easy, but when you face what seems impossible and you keep going. The problem is that many people look at difficulties and see a reason to give up, when in fact they are confirmation that they are on the right path. Those without a calling can live a life without major challenges, but those who are chosen are constantly being formed because they can't be like everyone else. Their destiny is different. The real question is not, why am I going through this? But what for? Because there is a purpose. If you are facing financial difficulties, it may be because God is teaching you to trust in the unseen. It may be because He is preparing you to handle greater resources. It may be because He wants you to learn to depend on Him and not on circumstances. Think about it. If you had everything you wanted today, would you be ready to handle the responsibility that would come with it? Or could what seems like a blessing become a burden you're not ready to carry? God does not give anything until the person is ready to receive it. So if you feel that your journey has been more challenging than others, perhaps it's because your mission is greater. But for that mission to be fulfilled, you must see beyond what your eyes can see. And this is only possible if you change the way you think about and interpret every experience you have. Financial difficulties are often a means, not an end. You're not being forgotten, you're being prepared. But the question is, are you ready to receive what you ask for? Because it's not money that changes your life, it's your mentality. If your way of looking at the world doesn't change, even if you receive a lot, you will continue to live as if you had little. Think of a person who makes a lot of money but is afraid to spend it, afraid to lose it, afraid that it will all end. They may have money, but they still live in scarcity. On the other hand, there are those who live in peace even with little, because their security is not in what they have, but in the confidence that there will always be provision. True abundance doesn't begin when you have a lot, but when you learn to see what you already have in a new way. Those who see only lack are always asking for more. But those who understand that they already have all they need, use what they have wisely, and make it multiply. When I walked among you, I spoke of faith the size of a mustard seed, because it's not the size of the resources you have that matters, but the faith you have in them. He who believes even with little prospers, but he who doubts even with much feels poor. So before you wish for more, ask yourself, how have I handled what I already have? If you are facing difficulties today, God may be teaching you to change your attitude. He may be waiting for you to stop seeing yourself as someone with no way out and start acting like someone who already has enough to take the next step. Because what determines your future is not what you have now, but how you use it. And this is something that many people don't realize. They ask for prosperity, but continue to live as if they were prisoners of scarcity. They want abundance, but still doubt their own ability to create, multiply, and manage. They think they need a lot to get started, when in fact they only need to learn to appreciate and use well the little they already have. The great transformation is happening within you. When your mind changes, your life changes. When you begin to see possibilities instead of limitations, doors begin to open. When you decide that you will no longer be controlled by the fear of lack, what once seemed impossible becomes accessible. So ask yourself, have I prepared myself for what I'm asking for? For waiting is never empty. It always has a purpose. And if God hasn't given you something yet, it may be because He is waiting for you to be ready to receive it. But how do you know when you're ready? How do you understand if there is still something in you that needs to be transformed before the abundance comes? These are fundamental questions because how you answer them determines what comes next. What do you do when the money doesn't seem to be enough? How do you feel when the bills come and you don't know how to pay them? Do you despair? Do you get anxious? Do you feel wronged? Or do you trust that somehow everything will be taken care of? How you respond to scarcity reveals a lot about your faith, your attitude, and your willingness to receive more. When I was among you, I saw many who were going through difficulties and who reacted in different ways. Some rebelled, others gave in to despair. But there were those who trusted even with nothing, and those were the ones who experienced miracles. Consider the widow of Zarephath. She had only a little flour and oil, enough for one last meal. To human eyes, her situation was hopeless, but when she was tested and asked to trust, she chose faith over fear. And guess what happened? What little she had was multiplied, and she never lacked again. The truth is that before God entrusts you with great things, He watches how you handle the little things. If there is a lack today, it could be a test to see if you are led by fear or trust. For those who despair of the little will continue to despair of the much, but those who learn to trust in the provision, regardless of the circumstances, are ready to manage something greater. Maybe you're asking for abundance, but your mind is still stuck in the fear of lack. You say you trust, but your fear proves otherwise. You ask for abundance, but you act like someone who is always afraid of losing. How could God put something greater in your hands if you haven't learned to rest in the certainty that you will be sustained? Scarcity is not a punishment. It can be a learning process, an invitation to change the way you look at life, a test to see if your faith is firm or if it depends on circumstances. Because those who are chosen cannot live in fear. They must learn to walk, even if they can't see the whole path. If there is a lack today, look inside yourself and ask, what is this situation trying to teach me? Because sometimes the door to abundance opens only when you learn to trust, even when there is no sign of a solution. But how do you build that trust? How do you act when everything seems to say there's no way out? How do you develop a faith that doesn't fluctuate with the amount of money in your bank account? This is essential to understand, because the way you respond to scarcity will determine whether you are ready for abundance. Many people ask for prosperity, But without realizing it, they are feeding the scarcity mentality. They think they trust in God, but deep down their emotions fluctuate according to what they have or don't have. When they have money, they feel peace. When there is no money, they despair. But that's not faith. That's dependence on circumstances. True faith is not the faith that exists when everything is going well, but the faith that remains firm in the face of uncertainty. For if your peace depends on money, then money rules your life, not God. And as long as your faith is based on what is fleeting, you will continue to live in ups and downs, always at the mercy of uncertainty. When I said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you," I revealed a powerful principle. Those who put their trust in the source and not in the means will never be forsaken. That doesn't mean they will never face challenges, but they will never be helpless. Scarcity persists in the lives of many because they have not yet learned to trust fully. They say they believe in God's provision, but their actions show otherwise. They live counting every penny, fearing tomorrow, trapped in the idea that there will never be enough. But what happens when someone thinks this way? Their own beliefs create barriers to the flow of abundance. The mind has much more creative power than you realize. When you believe there is always lack, you begin to act out of fear, make decisions based on insecurity, and end up closing doors that could open. But those who live with the certainty that there is provision regardless of appearances attract whatever they need. If you want to experience abundance, you must first change the way you think and feel about life. Instead of focusing on what you lack, learn to be grateful for what you already have. Instead of fearing the future, learn to trust that every need will be met in time. Abundance begins in the mind, and only those who free themselves from the fear of lack can live fully. Perhaps God is waiting for you to change your vision before He gives you more. For as long as your faith is based on the instability of money, any wealth that comes your way will be a source of anxiety, not peace. The real supply is not in the bank account, but in the certainty that whatever happens, you will be supported. But how do you build that confidence? How do you replace fear with the certainty that nothing will be lacking? How do you live so that your faith doesn't depend on what's in your hands, but on what's in your heart? These are essential answers for anyone who wants to break out of the cycle of scarcity and enter the flow of true abundance. Many people spend their lives trying to solve their financial problems on the outside, looking for new jobs, extra income, strategies to earn more. But what few realize is that the real root of scarcity lies not in the opportunities that appear or fail to appear, but in the way you position yourself internally in the face of life. If scarcity persists, it may be because something inside you hasn't changed yet. The outside world is always a reflection of what is inside us. If there is fear, insecurity, or an unconscious belief that it is difficult to prosper, that will be your reality. And no matter how much money comes to you, it will always find a way to leave because your inner structure hasn't been transformed. Have you ever seen people who make a lot of money but live in debt? Or others who earn little but always have enough? This is because abundance is not just about what you receive, but how you manage, feel, and see the resources that pass through your hands. If you believe that money is hard to come by, your mind will create invisible obstacles to keep that belief alive. You may miss opportunities, make impulsive decisions, or even reject paths that could lead to prosperity without realizing it. But when you come to believe that you are supported by something greater than your circumstances, everything changes. When I walked among you, many were impressed by the way resources appeared when they were needed. Not because money fell from the sky, but because complete trust in the provision opened ways that seemed impossible. Bread was multiplied, the sea was opened, doors were unlocked, and it all happened because there was faith in the unseen. The key to unlocking your financial life lies not only in what you do, but in what you believe. Do you really believe that you will be taken care of? Or are you just hoping that something will change to make you feel secure? Are you acting like someone who trusts or someone who lives in fear? For what you project into the world is what the world gives back to you. If you want abundance to flow into your life, start by changing your relationship with resources. Instead of thinking about what you lack, appreciate what you already have. Instead of acting out of fear, act with the certainty that there will always be provision. Instead of holding on to everything for fear of losing, learn to give. knowing that what is shared always returns multiplied. God doesn't want you to live in scarcity, but He won't give you anything you're not ready to handle. Your financial life may be stuck because there is still a lesson to be learned. And when that lesson is absorbed, when your mindset is transformed, everything will begin to flow differently. But there is one last thing that needs to be understood. Something essential that may be preventing you from experiencing the fullness of divine provision. Because it's not enough to change your mindset, you must also learn to receive what God has already prepared for you. Many people ask for prosperity, but deep down they don't know how to receive it. Have you ever thought about that? They ask God to open doors, but when they appear, they hesitate. They want abundance, but when it comes time to act, they are overcome with fear. The truth is, it's not enough to ask. You have to be willing to receive. And receiving doesn't just mean having something in your hands, but accepting inside that you deserve what God has already prepared for you. If you still have doubts, guilt, or limiting beliefs about money, even when the blessing comes, you will find ways to lose it or reject it. As I have walked among you, I have seen this happen many times. People who faced healing but hesitated to believe. Men and women who had the opportunity to change their lives but chose to stay with what they already knew because the new scared them. It's the same with prosperity. God does not withhold anything from anyone, but many don't know how to open their hands to grasp what He is offering. Have you ever noticed how some people always find a reason not to take the next step? They say they want a new opportunity, but when it comes, they doubt they can handle it. They ask for growth, but when the opportunity comes, they don't feel ready. This is because before you can receive something in the outer world, you have to receive it inwardly. Today, if you feel that your financial life is stuck, ask yourself, am I really open to receiving what God has for me? Or is it that deep down, I'm afraid of change? Do I have beliefs that make me feel unworthy? Am I subconsciously sabotaging myself by putting off decisions that could take me to the next level? Abundance already exists, but only those who are ready can access it. For many, the biggest blockage is not the lack of money, but the difficulty in accepting that they can prosper. The mind creates justifications, sticks to old patterns, and keeps the person right where they've always been. But the good news is that this can change. God wants to give you more. He wants you to have peace, security, resources to live well and to help others. But in order for this to happen, you must align yourself with this truth. You have to stop living in expectation of lack and start living as someone who already knows they are provided for. When you change the way you think and feel, when you begin to truly trust and see yourself as someone who deserves to receive, everything begins to flow. What once seemed difficult becomes natural. What once seemed like an obstacle becomes an opportunity. For those who are ready to receive, receive. So look inside yourself and ask, what do I need to release in order for abundance to flow into my life? For when you are ready, what once seemed distant will become real. And the scarcity that was once, your reality will become just a memory of a time when you didn't know how sustainable you always were.